This is quite an overdue response, I guess, to what's been happening in the media lately with regards to Lucy Letby. I have been quite unwell, on top of other things, ended up with a week-long migraine headache and a health scare, but everything's all right, and not really feeling like doing this now either, but I'll give a few thoughts, because I have been posting about Lucy Letby, so I guess in light of Dr. Shoo Lee using media to stir up a frenzy, I should follow through with a response. So what I did was I just made a few notes, but really this is notes on each of the babies, but really I don't think I'm going to go into depth. People can research what they like, they can find what they can online through various outlets and decide for themselves what they think. What do I think about Dr. Shoo Lee's position and what he's doing? Well, what he's doing is he's saying that he's presenting, hey, just an updated peer review paper, but it's really not like that. He needs to disclose to where he's publishing that he is doing this in response to a court case as part of a defense and as part of an attempt at an appeal attempt which has already failed for the defense with regards to Dr. Shoo Lee's paper, and by that I mean his rewritten, updated paper, which surely can't be sufficiently peer-reviewed since it was really only completed, what was it, December? Was it submitted in November last year and published December 2024? And he has admitted that it was in response to the Lucy Letby trial. Okay. Also note too that because ear embolus is very rare, the paper itself is a study originally from 1989 of 57 cases. That is not that's considered nearly bad science. If that were to be, say, a research study put together specifically from volunteers or what have you, it would be considered too small to be giving reliable data. But anyway, so look, I wrote myself some notes just in case my migraine comes back as I stare at myself here and with lights and everything, just to give this some structure, all right? And really, I mean, the only opinion I can give, it is opinion obviously, and it's for entertainment purposes, but all I can really do is just say, well, how do I feel about Letby herself? I'm not a forensic pathologist. In fact, none of the team of Dr. Shoo Lee are forensic pathologists. Okay, so let's see. Sorry. Letby supporters cry about her trial by media, yet are thrilled to the gills. Sorry, I can barely read it. It's pretty dark. Hold on. Letby supporters cry about her trial by media, yet are thrilled to the gills about the campaign from Dr. Shoo Lee now using the media and a media frenzy to promote his so-called new evidence rather than going directly to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, CCRC. Well, I guess he will be, right, or it will be taken there. Did you realize that what he presented is a summary? And it's a summary because he hasn't actually completely, he hasn't finished writing this report that will be used to go to the CCRC. It's maybe going to be finished by the end of this month. So I don't know how people can have an opinion on it when it's not completed and then when it hasn't been reviewed against every single case that Lucy Letby was brought up in charges for, and it will have to prove her innocence on every single count, not just one or two. If there's even one left out that they can't explain, well, what does that say? Anywho, his report, it's not complete, it's a summary that's been submitted, and the report is in totality due to be delivered at the end of this month. It's going to have to be a report that in full can be cross-referenced for all cases against all known facts. That should be a bare minimum benchmark for people getting on a Free Lucy bandwagon. She lost two tries at appeal, with the Dr. Shoo redone paper being denied as being too late an entry into the evidence. It should have been used in the initial court case. He should have been brought as a witness. You know, how do we feel about the defense? Do you feel like it's substandard because there's just some, sort of conspiracy theory reason as to why they set themselves up to fail? Or do you just think, if you haven't got a defense, you can't bring one, right? Her defense was either to be considered mediocre or simply doing the best with what little they had. Dr. Shoo and his motley crew, I can barely read this, now have the onus on them to disprove every single charge against Letby, because that's what they've invited themselves to do. They have invited themselves to disprove every single charge. Not one of them, or 3 or 7, but all. It needs to explain Lucy Letby's lies, her lies in court. It needs to explain her fraud, her fraudulent activities in the hospital. It needs to explain her unprofessionalism and the fact that she agreed in court that insulin had been maliciously administered to babies. Oh, except not by me. The chorus of scapegoat rings loudly and is more like an echo chamber than many individuals presenting their true reckonings. We also hear revenge so often that you have to think that Lucy was sticking it to doctors and administration for months or years before she was ever accused. This is absolutely false. In my opinion, Lucy Letby is not a whistleblower and was not singled out because of any staunch and courageous attitude she had towards safety issues or the quality of care at the Countess of Chester Hospital, provided by doctors, consultants, or other nurses, although this doesn't mean that Letby wasn't critical at times. Trust me, I'm a nurse, Lucy Letby spoke to one terrified parent of a baby who was in crash. It seems to sum up her general outward attitude, okay? Trust me, I'm a nurse. That her scrawlings and scratchings on scraps of paper and post-it notes seem to present a person more insecure and unsure of their abilities is one of the many contradictory aspects of Letby's personality. These notes were, as per Lucy's own testimony in court, something she did as a habit and weren't at the prompting of counsellors, and that includes occupational health workers like DeBeggar. Letby's diary was also found to be marked with the initials of the dead babies. Initials of those who had died were found to have been marked on the dates that these babies were born and the days that the prosecution alleged she attacked them, and on the days that she died. This was in her diary. Lucy Letby was not storing private and confidential documentation illegally in her home and in her parents' home as a means of securing proof of malpractice and subpar care regarding the death and suffering of babies at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Perhaps if she had said that in her own defence, the betrayal of privacy would have had at least some feasible, forgivable meaning, right? But the papers just followed her home. just ended up there. She didn't give an answer other than she collects bits of paper. 250 pages, including paper towel with notes that were fished out of ward rubbish bins to be taken home. That's more than the odd bit of paper that, with a busy schedule, an exhausted nurse might sometimes find in the pockets of her scrubs. And although Lucy had a paper shredder, it was never used. So she wasn't accidentally taking documents home because she's so tired at the end of the night, doesn't empty all her pockets, gets home, finds that she's got confidential paperwork, shreds it or returns it to the hospital because, there are places in the hospital where you're supposed to put this paperwork so that it can be destroyed. It is an illegal act to have it. It breaches privacy laws, and it's not a diligent nurse that does this, and not to the extent that Lucy had it. Now, this was all sorts of paperwork, including paperwork pertaining to the babies that she's been convicted of harming. We could say alleged harming. Believe it or not, I'm open to that. I think anyone might be, but we need to see things play out quite differently and have explanations for things. And what a strange and fortuitous coinkydink for the hospital to finger such a weird creature. What a stroke of luck on behalf of the hospital to decide to set up Letby as their scapegoat, with her ludicrous habits and questionable way of interacting with other human beings. Didn't they just luck in? Didn't they just have a stroke of, good luck to just decide to scapegoat someone? I mean, why would they scapegoat someone? If people are, if she's as good as some people are saying they are, wouldn't they choose a nurse that was, just somebody else? She had emotional intimacy, at the very least, with a married doctor, Dr. A. She was intrusive to parents and their time with their ill babies and their dying babies, and just not mindful at all of their space in their grief. As one baby lay dying in the arms of its mother, Lucy offered to place the baby in one of the baskets that the hospital used to place deceased babies. This baby is dying in the mother's arms. She would probably like to sit there with her quiet interaction, that intense intimacy that she should be having with this baby. And Lucy is hovering and offering to place the baby in a basket for the dead. The mother said, "She's not dead yet." After two male triplets, there were the triplets, and this was the straw that broke the camel's back, wasn't it? After two male triplets had died, Letby said an earshot to the mother about the remaining triplet. "She's not leaving here alive, is she?" That baby was transferred to another hospital. Letby wrote a card out to the parents of the triplets. Two boys had died out of these triplets. She wrote in sympathy and named all three babies. I mean, is this severe awkwardness, is it? Is this just an exhausted nurse trying her best, really thinking about this family, wanting them to know they're there? It was written in a way that named all three babies as deceased. Again, another instance where parents were deeply disturbed. Deeply disturbed. Letby penned a Mother's Day card adding a photograph. Now this is the photograph I've talked about, and you get all sorts of whack jobs coming into the comments making up BS like, but the baby was being discharged that day. The baby was being weaned off oxygen anyway. Look, get your facts right, and then you can have an opinion, and you can have all the opinions you want. That baby's photo was taken days before Mother's Day. Okay, it was taken well before any oxygen weaning journey. The baby is clearly in pain and distress in the photograph, and then the Mother's Day card was given to the mother. Oh, I thought that you would just like it. A picture of your baby without the ventilation that it needed, and needed 24/7. No, the mother didn't like it, Lucy. She didn't. She didn't like it at all. Don't know what I've written here. Let's just read it. Did Lucy Letby stalk the parents of babies because her whistleblower self felt that these dead babies would be alive if not for the failings of CCH? Was she trying to somehow assuage the overwhelming fear she felt at having this knowledge? Unsure what to do, did she express in her notes that this is what she was doing? No. I mean, of course, Letby could simply be a terrified nurse, not diligent, not professional. She may have felt inadequate and concerned about her ability to successfully nurse on the neonatal ward. Why then would she persevere? She certainly could be critical of other staff at the CCH, other nurses, etc., but did she turn that into whistleblower action? Did she say that she didn't feel that being a mentor to lesser experienced nurses was a good idea to consider, considering the doubts she may have been having about herself? No. She never was a whistleblower. She wasn't someone that they wanted to shut up because of that. If she's having doubts about her performance, she certainly wasn't trying to ensure that perhaps then she's not in a situation where she might harm babies, She was always pushing for the highest of responsibilities to be taking on the care of the sickest of babies. Indeed, if she was in a ward looking after a baby that wasn't needing, such hands-on care, she would be found in the ward where the sickest babies were. She'd just be in there, not minding her own business, busy doing her own nursing, okay? Is this just luck that the so-called gang of four wanted to highlight Lucy Letby and investigate her? She admitted in her first police interview to being concerned about the deaths at the CCH. When asked in what way, she simply deflected to state, well, we all felt that something was wrong. I mean, that's hardly whistleblower material. Here is your chance, Lucy Letby, to say, yeah, I have been gravely concerned, and this is why I'm being ganged up on. I am being this blame is being thrust upon me because I have been the one saying that the doctors and consultants are incompetent. Well, look, I know how people feel about Stephen Breary. He had been at the CCH for many, many years, probably 7 years before this palaver all started. So if he's to blame, where are the odd happenstances occurring before the Letby factor? What else did I write? Letby was often experiencing what would be, usually some very traumatic events being the crashing and deaths of babies on the wards she worked on. Rather than becoming increasingly alarmed and pressing management for answers, Letby pressed for more difficult shifts and to spend more time on wards caring for the most vulnerable of the babies. Now, she had completed 6-month training specifically for neonatal care before going into this ward, and she was one of only 2 junior nurses that did have this qualification. So yes, of course, she is picking up extra shifts. She was staying on campus or on, in nurse accommodation at the hospital at the time, but then eventually bought her own house, and of course she probably wanted the money. If she was racked with self-doubt in her nursing skills, why would she want to be put under more pressure and put in more situations where she would hold those lives in her hands? Why not take the prescribed and offered time away to process the trauma and debrief? Letby had 2 training placements at Liverpool Women's Hospital in late 2012 and early 2015, which came under investigation after her conviction. The BBC has reported that potentially life-threatening incidents occurred almost a third of Letby's 33 shifts whilst on these placements. Potentially life-threatening was not defined and no comparison data was provided in their reporting. In November 2012, a baby Letby was looking after collapsed and water was discovered in its breathing tube. In Letby's past, in July 2013, Letby and a more senior nurse set the infusion rate for a newborn's morphine at 10 times the correct amount, leading to a supervision from administrating controlled drugs by the unit ward manager, Griffiths. Letby, who was upset by the decision, was required to undergo extra training. Her supervision was lifted a week later after she complained to Arian Powell about it, the unit manager, who had been on leave at the time of the incident. Lucy told colleagues the supervision was an over-escalation, which Griffiths disputed. In 2015, she qualified to work with infants in intensive care, and in April 2016, she administered antibiotics to an infant that was not prescribed them, which she misclassified as a minor error. Was it a minor error, Lucy Letby, or was it a minor experiment? One needs to know, in her trial, she was just facing charges about specific babies. There's lots and lots of other things that happened in Lucy's nursing career that are very, very strange. And people pick on the way that the statistics were gathered about when she was on shift and what was happening. But it's the same way that statistics were, that trouble was pinpointed in an old Indiana case for Orville Majors. This is in the 90s, and he's suspected of killing scores of patients. He was injecting them with potassium chloride, and he really was a despicable person. Yes. So what other things can we think about? Yeah. Dr. Lee. Yeah, so I was wondering about that original paper. 57 babies, it's such a small sample size, but I guess that's all the cases that they were. But for an example, a paper that I studied because I wanted to look at things in relation to the Delphi murders. It was a thesis for a doctorate, so she made sure to look at 114 cases. You're supposed to have the 100 plus a 10% buffer. he's also rewritten it because his original paper too was pulmonary vascular air embolism in the newborn, and he has rewritten it to involve IV air embolism. Yeah. He published the paper just before Christmas, and he has clearly stated, I think it might have been a journalist for the Times Radio, that he'd done it in the hope that this could be submitted as fresh evidence. So, you know, there is a clear conflict of interest here that he has to declare to the publishing house that he's paid to publish his paper, or someone paid for him, who knows. Just because people are volunteering their time, it doesn't mean that they're not funded or they're not getting something out of it. Yeah. I hope his ego isn't blowing up too much. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if there's anything that I want to read out. Oh yeah, okay. So regarding a conflict of interest, Dr. Shoo explains that the review itself was conducted as a preparation for the original appeal hearing, not as a result of it, and formed part of the statement he made to the court dated 26th of March 2024 and was originally submitted on May 20th, 2024 to a journal who declined to publish it, but that the reviewer recommended changing the analysis to separate the various types of air embolism. That change was made and the result was published. He denies there is a conflict of interest to declare because his original submission to the COA, which incorporated this work, is a matter of public record, and because the review and associated manuscript was submitted to a journal before the COA judgment was released, and because it was submitted before his decision to involve himself in the case pro bono more fully, and finally because the decision to separate out the types of air embolism was made by a reviewer, COA being Court of Appeal, of course. Regarding the comments of letby supporters who have come up with the convoluted arguments that Dr. Lee's categorizations are correct, they're missing the point made to the pub peer comment, which was very measured. Dr. Lee has made a subjective categorization on a subject where he has a conflict of interest. You can tie yourself in knots trying to pretend that he is right, but it doesn't change the fact that he has made a subjective decision on a subject where he has a conflict of interest and hasn't provided a rationale for why he has categorized the cases differently than the original authors did. So, I don't know. Academically, are there red flags all over this paper of Dr. Shoo? Yeah, I think you have to wonder about his motivations, and that does cast doubt on how reliable his conclusions are. Because, you know, his conflict, I think the conflict of interest is clear because he has said that the paper was written to help with the defense. He should have just declared it when he submitted the paper to the journal. As long as things are declared, surely that's fine. And then I can't remember who wrote this, but I've cut and pasted this in here. I cannot imagine what would be perceived as a more conflicting intellectual belief than knowingly publishing a paper beneficial to a criminal appellant whilst being involved with their defence and arguing for their release from prison completely outside the rules of the local justice system. But then I also can't imagine such a distinguished academic publishing unless he was very confident he would not face retraction and censure for it. So, yeah. December 2024, it's February 2025. How many people have read that paper who are qualified to review it, I wonder? His author statement says the original draft was written by his co-author. He's now saying he wrote it for the court. He specifically told a journalist that it was deliberately done so it would be considered new evidence. And saying it was public knowledge that he appeared for Lucy's defence does not absolve him from declaring the conflict of interest when he submits the paper. Also, it is irrelevant that the original paper was submitted before the COA judgment was released. The defence already knew that the appeal had been rejected before it was publicly released. His new claim is that there is only one symptom of VAE that he finds diagnostic: bright pink vessels against a generally cyanosed cutaneous background instead of the variety of discoloration seen in the letby cases. Yeah. Anyway, the Court of Appeal was not kind to Dr. Shoo. Okay, so look, he's definitely got something to prove. So we shall see. We shall see how it goes. Anyway, this is 32 minutes and 26 seconds. So I'll see you all later. Goodbye.